So we played Hostel, and Hostel was really fun. It's just a variation of Traveler, and it played a lot like Traveler. It's a little more of a not as robust, I think, as at least the current, because it's based on Mongoose's Traveler first edition, and I'm more familiar with their second edition, which is a little more robust rule set. But it's also been pared down to really emulate more like Alien, that kind of level of technology and that level of that kind of genre of sci-fi. But the only thing that I think we found was difficult about it was, right anyway, was that you need like 4 or 5 books just to make and equip your character and kind of understand what's going on. And then understand the setting. Some of it's there's one book that's kind of the core rules for how you generate a character and run through kind of encounters. But then there's a setting book that has a lot of specifics about equipment and things like that. And then there's a separate book with like weapons. And so just to sort of make and equip a character, and I think you'd mentioned everybody else got them through like on a humble bundle or
it was bundle holding or
bundle holding.
Yeah.
So you got a good deal on getting them all at once. Whereas I kind of came late to the game, and it's like, well, what book is that in? Where's that? What? Okay, now I need to go get that.
Where that all should be together. It should all be in one purchase.
But once we started playing, it was fine.
Most unlikely of villains, schools of playing and for pause. Does it talk? Does it know how? Does it bottle? Does it meow? Let on the cerebral bore. And I'll show them so much more. We'll leave your brains at the door.
See how it is. This isn't like one of your meetings where you don't have to pay attention, Mr. Rodriguez.
Yeah. What was that? Sorry.
This whole work at home thing. BJ, we had kind of, I don't know if Carl wants to do this or not. We had kind of talked about doing, because we were talking about layouts of books earlier in the audio dungeon. We were talking about, what's a good layout? What do we like in a role-playing book for the layout and, preferences, and what's a good layout? What's player friendly? And then maybe talk about starter sets, like what's an ideal starter set, and which ones have done a good job, stuff like that.
Well, I think you've got 2 books right now who are probably on opposite ends of the spectrums, where I think Old School Essentials has a great layout, and I think Pathfinder 2 has a horrible layout.
Right. So
But I differ from that. I don't like the OSE layout. I guess it's better in PDF than in books, because it's all these little books that you got to go from book to book. Yeah, so I don't like that. I prefer like Hyperborea, so layout.
Well, but
I don't have the new books. I have like 8 packages though. I don't think because I ordered the whatchamabopper, the leatherette, so it hasn't come in.
That's what I ordered for Hyperborea's leatherette. We're just gonna go from here. I was gonna ask you about that. So folks, I'm as always Jason from Nerds RPG Variety Cast. You're also hearing BJ from the Arcane Alienist and Carl from the Geomologist Presents. But BJ just showed the what do you call it?
This is the Old School Essentials Classic. I have it in 1 volume set. I don't have it
that's
four volumes, and there's pros and cons to each.
Have you looked at the 1 volume, Carl? Do you not like that layout as well?
I don't know if I have that. I don't think I have it in print, because I didn't see the point, because it's redundant.
Gotcha.
I don't like that kind of stuff. Honestly, irks me. Where like you have the same product and you're just doing it in another form. That annoys the crap out of me.
Yeah, well, it's a money
grab. Huh?
Yeah, that turned me off on the Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter, because they weren't doing anything new. All they were doing is repackage the Swords and Wizardry rules.
Well, I guess since I didn't have it.
And this is what I bought. I didn't Kickstart this. I bought this from the website.
Oh, okay.
I could have gotten this, or I could have gotten 4 small volumes, and I chose this.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want 4 volumes.
Yeah, so also joining us tonight is Joe Richter of Hindsightless. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you all doing?
Excellent. We just started. We haven't really talked much yet, but we're going to talk about RPG rule books, like what's a good layout, what's accessible. Now that you're here, you can definitely answer like PDFs. Like,
All right, that's really good that Joe's here.
yeah, so like what works for you? What's a good starter set? Different things like that. But,
Yeah.
like because some formats come out that are not very usable. BJ mentioned the Pathfinder 2 rule book.
Oh, it's terrible. I hate it.
That's a bad layout.
It's an awful layout.
Right. And mind you, Joe loves Pathfinder 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I DM'd the first ever homebrew Pathfinder 2 podcast. I love Pathfinder 2, and the book is terribly laid out. It's so hard to find stuff in there. Yeah.
It's funny. Before we started, I went and I thinking back in the day, what books I was saying, oh, the Palladium Fantasy wasn't bad. And I went back and looked, there's not even a table of contents in Palladium Fantasy.
Oh, wow.
It does have an index, but there's not even a table of contents.
I would say the first thing that makes for bad game design, or not game design, bad book design, is when you don't have an index.
Yes.
Right. Or a table of contents. You need both. But if I can only have one, I'd much rather have the index.
100%.
Yeah. So just to, we're not going to talk about rule systems so much as layout and
right.
Yeah, because we don't want to we're not putting anybody's game down. Although if you're a designer and you don't like what we're saying, maybe you need to hire an editor. I don't know, but
or come yell at us, leave us a message.
Yeah. So Carl mentioned before you hopped on, Joe. Carl was talking about he didn't like the OSC where they broke it down into all the little books. So, which you might not know, but the way they sell it now, what you buy, they have broken down like 3 or 4 different books, or all these little books,
right?
And I think the way they broke down OSC is kind of weird, actually, because you have like the core rules, and then you have a separate book for fantasy genre rules, and then you have like a separate book for some of the spells, and you have it. I don't know. I mean, what do you got? I mean, it always seemed weird to me the way they did it.
It kind of follows the. It's kind of like the 3-volume, say for D&D, except they've added a 4th volume. So you've got a monster book, which is effectively your monster manual. You've got. Oh no, it doesn't. I take that back. And then you've got a treasure book, which is just treasure and magic items. You've got a book that's got the spells. And then you've got, is it a 4-volume set that the basic rules come in, or is it a 5-volume?
No, I don't know. I don't know. I have BX. I don't
classic has monsters, rules, treasure.
Okay, so that's 3.
And cleric and magic use your spells.
Yeah, so it's got a book. It's got a spell book. What they did is they've got
core rules, because I got 2.
And the core rules are the.
Maybe I do have the black one. Is that the one with like a dragon and a rainbow farting wizard?
Depends on which printing you got.
It has like a gold dragon, and then this wizard that's like farting a rainbow or something.
Yeah, I think it depends on which printing you got. It's got your rules, which have your classes and your procedural rules for how you manage combat and saving throws and traps and all that, which is typically what you find in a player's handbook. Mm-hmm. Except they've separated out the spells into a separate volume if you get the 4-volume set. And then you've got one book that's the monster manual, one book that's treasure.
Yeah, and I wonder, BJ, if like the multiple books is probably cool, like at the table, right? Because that's what you right. But and I would probably be okay with that. And but the multiple PDFs to me is a little bit of a pain. When I had to make a character for your awesome Temple of Elemental Evil OSC game, I was like, I got to look at like 5 different books plus Carcass Crawler.
Well, that was because we're using.
I know, but you incorporate the advanced fantasy, right? You incorporate the other stuff, like advanced fantasy and all that, and that's kind of what it's like jumping from book to book. I felt like it was Pathfinder 1. Well, except now Pathfinder 1 has the SRD, so you don't need to do that. But before they had all that awesome SRD that they have, you had to go everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the SRD is worth talking about at some point as well tonight. But
Right, because going back to jumping quickly back to Pathfinder 2, it's like Articles of Nethys is better than the book. Right. I use Articles of Nethys usually to look stuff up.
Archives of Nethys, right?
Whatever, archives. Yeah, Archives of Nethys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at my my original Pathfinder rule book now. The spine's all taped together because it's been beat to crap. And this thing, it's a monster, but it's got, I mean, you can run. Does it have monsters in here? I think it has a few monsters in here. And like I'm a splat book guy. You guys know I got no beef with splat books. I don't consider that part of the layout though. Like if I'm buying a game, I want everything, like all the core stuff that I'll need to run an adventure all in one thing, like the rules, the magic, the monsters, all there. And then you sell me all the books you want afterwards. But yeah, I kind of like a more condensed package.
But it's got to be a complete game. That's one thing that's kind of weird with these powered by 5e games that are coming out now, is they don't include some, like you have to have the free, they're free, but you need the free basic rules off Wizards of the Coast website to run those games. Like they just came out with a 5e powered Doctor Who game, because it makes money. I mean, that's the only reason they did it. It's because, financial reasons, because they have a perfectly good Doctor Who game. But that doesn't come with all the rules. You need the D&D basic. It's same thing with Beowulf Age of Heroes, and same thing with Adventures in Middle Earth. I mean, if you were familiar with the games, you could probably run it with just that. But if you've never played D&D before, you have to get another book to play those games.
That's also part of their OGL, right? Isn't that part of their?
I think for 5e is part of the gaming license.
Let's say you have to reference to the player's handbook at least as part of the OGL, right? So, and that's interesting. To me, that was a big problem with, as much as I like the Iron Kingdom's verse, I was like, it didn't really give a lot of guidelines on, where there were gaps in rules that you had to go look for. I mean, one would hope that they'd say, all right, this is not covered in this book, go look for X in the player's handbook, but they left out a lot of that kind of wording, right? So then, especially when it came to things like magic items.
And that's something that was cool with some of the Savage Worlds books, like and GURPS did this as well. So 3rd edition GURPS, like Hellboy, is a standalone rule book. It has all the rules you need in there. You don't need the GURPS books plus Hellboy. It's all you need is Hellboy. It's standalone. And Savage Worlds did that with like Solomon Kane. I think Pirates of Spanish Main also has all the rules in the book, so you don't need the main Savage Worlds book as well. It's a one-stop shop, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think they continue that with some of the properties in Suede. So the Pathfinder, Savage Pathfinder, it's all one book, and the Rifts, it's all one book. So, and Deadlands, you need the core. But I mean, it's always good to have the reference to core anyway. But ones that are a little different, like especially Savage Pathfinder, which has, they have all they use like the classes as kind of, your opening talent / archetype. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I guess we should. I don't know. We're kind of rambling a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say let's go around and each say something they think either that they think needs to be is a good business practice for a rule book, right? Yeah, let's just do that. What do you think is a good practice for manufacturers? And then we'll go back through and say what we don't like to see. How about that? So I'm going to give kind of an oddball one, but I like, and this is touch and go, right? So fiction is kind of touch and go. Like Cyberpunk 2020 has some stories in it. Now they help you get in the cyberpunk genre, and it doesn't overdo it. But there are a lot of books in there that have, like 40 pages of short stories in your RPG book, which to me is way too much, right? If you have a couple pages here, a couple pages there, is one thing. But I think too much fiction in there, especially when a lot of it's not very good fiction in a lot of the games, I think that's a problem. That what I do like, and again, this can be badly done, but I do like when they have a character talking to you as the reader. I know not everybody likes that, so I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. But like Marvel Superheroes TSR did that. Like Spider-Man talks to you about part of the rules, and Captain America talks about part of the rules. Doctor Doom explains how the villains work. Chill did this. Chill had a raven, like a mascot that was like a raven, and he would talk you through the rule sections. So I kind of like that, but mind you, that's probably because I picked up, when I was a little kid, Marvel, and picked that up. But I don't know. What do you guys think about those things?
I think it's, if you write a sidebar if those things are sidebars, you've got your kind of reference manual and you've got a sidebar where they're giving an example of play or a conceptual idea, whether that's just the author putting it in a sidebar to draw attention, or whether you want to present that as a short story or a narrative or even a character from the genre or the world you're playing in, like Doctor Doom or Captain America. I think that's fine as long as it's clearly partitioned out as a sidebar, or it's got a different section heading, or they do something to let you know we're shifting tone for a second to give you an example or to help you immerse yourself a little bit here.
Yeah, which these books did. Which they did. And so, yeah, I don't know. Any ideas on or any thoughts on those things, Carl?
I don't like it in the main text. I prefer it like as a sidebar. I mean, honestly,
usually in those games it would be like a section heading, like you'd have like a mini paragraph from the character, and then it will go into the rules, right?
Yeah, I
so
mean,
that kind of thing.
And I honestly I guess I'd rather just have rules in the rules book and fiction in the fiction book. I don't like how so a couple of companies that I can think of off the top of my head, anyone who ever makes Shadowrun, and the people who do all the superhero stuff for Onyx Path, which used to be World of Darkness, Aberrant, Trinity, Continuum. They always have some sort of fanfic interspersed here. World of Darkness does that all the time, right? Has some sort of fanfic interspersed between it. I don't particularly care for that, honestly. I get the rules as rules and put that stuff in the back or make it a separate thing. I mean, I don't know, because it's generally, and it's not. I mean, I don't mind examples. I think examples of play are fantastic, actually. But those kind of breaks, 2 or 3 pages of fanfic doesn't jive with me, honestly.
Yeah, because most of it's not. Most of it's not very good. Yeah, but I agree with you that examples are very important, and most games don't have enough examples of the rules, and that's one thing that OSE falls down on compared to BX, right? Combat examples and things. I mean, the BX example, you're talking, you go back to 81 or 83, but you look at that and they parlay. They don't just attack the goblins. They walk in a room, there are monsters in the room, and they talk to them. So it's teaching you, you know what I mean? And that's important to realize that you don't just have to attack everything because you're seeing it right there in the rules, or in the rule book, I should say, in the play example. But yeah, so pass the torch, whoever wants to grab it.
Joe, I guess. Here's a torch, Joe, catch.
I got it. Boom. Well, I just agree so hard with what BJ said earlier. Like, you got to have an index and a table of contents, like a good one, to make the book easy to use, if not during play, then during prep, as opposed to just sitting down and reading it leisurely. Just to be able to be like, crap, I need to know how Alchemist Fire works, and then go to the index and look up Fire, Alchemist. Okay, it's on this page, this page. Because, I mean, that's just where the PF2 book fell down super hard for me. Like, trying to find stuff in there was a nightmare because there is no indices or index. I'm terrible. And then the table of contents is garbage. It's like the most broad sections you've ever seen, and you're like, this isn't helpful. So specificity and completeness of an index, I think, are wildly important.
And even though I noticed, go ahead, PJ.
I would say something I noticed trying to play Pathfinder 2 when we're playing is I'll go to the index and it'll say, see this, and I'll go to see that, and it'll say, see this. So well, why didn't you just refer me to the first? And then a lot of times rules that seem like there should just be one paragraph that explains it. You've got to look at 3 different places in the book to understand how to put them together.
Yeah, that drives me crazy too. Another bad example, I guess it's not a bad example. Infinity from Modifius, the 2D20 system, also does that. We have to look at we get to a place that says see this and this and this, and then there's a couple players and myself going to those 3 different places to find the final ruling on what, and usually it's for like weapons. That's why I love the Birth for Infinity and all that kind of stuff. Beautiful art, right? So we'll probably get to talking about art, but the just the index and the cross referencing is not good at all. So in contrast, so one game one game that has, I think, very good indexing and it's annotated well. That's another pet peeve of mine too, is PDF without annotation. Columbia Games, that makes hard, don't have annotation. But Eclipse Phase I can't remember who makes it, but Eclipse Phase, their PDFs are in the first edition, all the PDFs were free, which is awesome. But they're all indexed in really good indices and a really good table of contents. Everything was annotated, and then you could click, like it had links, like reference links throughout the text. And they were, I guess it's a science fiction game that really talked about, this, hyper web type of thing. And they kind of made that almost a way really like a part of their layout for their PDF and their book, right? It's really neat. So,
just really quickly, if people are listening on the day, as of the day this releases, they're for the next 12 days, I'd have to do math, but 15 days from the 19th of July. Good luck on figuring that out. Eclipse
the 34th of July.
There you go. On the 34th of July, you have until the 34th of July to pick up Eclipse Phase 2E on the bundle of holding. It's $15 for a whole bunch. It's a really good bundle if you don't have any Eclipse Phase.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have all the Eclipse Phase stuff because I did the Kickstarter. So but it's actually really good. It's a really good game, honestly. Like one of my buddies.
No, I was just going to say, you get a lot. I'm done.
One of my buddies made and I haven't been drinking, which is crazy. I don't know why I'm interrupting. I apologize in advance for everyone. But one of the, a notable character when I ran Eclipse Phase, the first edition, was one of my buddies made like a clone of Winston, from, was that video game? The one that Overwatch or something?
Movie?
No, Winston, like he's an ape. He's a flying. He's an ape, like an uplifted ape with a jetpack.
I don't know.
He's on the cover of Fate, but
that guy too. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just real quickly, for $15 for PDFs, you get the core book, the rules primer, the character pack, the router case files, Xenophore, Overrun, a bunch of adventures, just a bunch of stuff. I mean, if you're interested.
Right on. Cool. And I like that it's timely. That's awesome. Good for us.
Well, that's the only reason I put it in there, because I know this is coming out Friday. So we can.
What about you, BJ? What's something you think that designers should lay out their books like?
Well, I do want to back up for just a second. You're talking about characters saying things. I think Wizards of the Coast has done a good job with their series, their supplemental series, where it's always attributed to one of the iconic NPCs, Mordenkainen, Tasha, Xanathar, Volo, Elminster will make little comments about monsters or locations, and they're usually just one sentence and they're funny. And occasionally they'll be like Volo's guide has, where Volo has said something and Elminster comes in and says, no, that's not true. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's not real distracting from the text. Contrast that to the Dresden role-playing game, which I was really excited about. The Dresden role-playing game. I can't get through the book because
Dresden, the Fate one?
Yeah, because it's written by Butters, who's one of Dresden's allies, but then there's the rules, and then there's constant annotations and notes back and forth between Butters and Dresden throughout the whole book, and it's just extremely distracting. Because they put it in there, it looks like Post-it notes. It looks like red. I've scratched that out and made a note in the margin. It just a couple of pages that would have been funny, but it just goes through the whole book. But as far as something I think is essential, publishers need to pay attention to is not giving you a wall of text. And I know space is at a premium and it adds to publishing costs, but the use of spacing and margins to just make sure that it's not hard on the eyes and that sections are clearly, you can tell where one section ends, where one begins. And obviously artwork is great to put in there if you can afford it, but you can do some really nice. That's one of the things I do appreciate about Old School Essentials is the spacing on page layouts. Even the ones that don't have any art, are, it's clear, it's not excessively wordy. Now, I think if you're giving examples of play and trying to help draw somebody in and put their head around it, that's one thing where you want to be a little more wordy and a little more prolific with your prose or however you want to say it. But when you're getting down to the technical aspects of explaining a rule, quick, to the point, concise, but with enough explanation that you're still clear about what you mean. I think that some of that's in the writing, but a lot of it has to do with just the layout of how you put it on the page and how you space it and what order you put things in and where you use bullets versus where you use paragraphs, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one thing that when you talk to people who played Phoenix Command or had the Phoenix Command books, there are quotes, funny quotes throughout the whole series, and they're great. Just little one-liners like BJ saying, but just these crazy one-liners. Maybe I'll go grab book when somebody else is talking here in a minute and read some to you. But the other thing you mentioned though, with examples, I mean that's something we remember from like the Rollmaster games. Those of us that had those, because you've got an example in Rollmaster where during the play example that there's an argument and the GM punches the player and the player doesn't come back the following week.
What? Wow.
It's real life, man.
Yeah.
It's real life.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, but Rollmaster had some funny examples in there.
Yeah, I think going back to like my pet peeve about these long like short stories in books, I think in contrast, I don't mind a little bit of like narration from the point of view of like some, characters in the world. And I think a game that does a great job of that, like you're saying that Phoenix Command has these really nice, fun anecdotes that the characters in their verse are saying.
Yeah.
Is Twilight 2000 always does a good job of that. They'll introduce, like a little scene of, of the players kind of, or the team or the survivors coming across, something, and it's like a paragraph, and I think it totally works, and then that's it. And then the cool thing about that is you could take it to, you can kind of use that, paraphrase that when your player characters like stumble on the very similar scene. Like I think a great one actually is and maybe I'll read that on one of my podcasts. It's like from the Pirates of Vistula when they first see the boat, that they're gonna be riding on up the Vistula. So, but it's really cool. It's really cool narration. So it's sometimes it's a good thing, but I think overdone, it's not so good. But I like that. I think people like examples, like a little bit of narration. I remember classically, right, the BX, how they have like GM says something, player, they have the name of the player and they're playing, and then they have the name of the character they're playing, and then they'll say what they do. And then I remember classically when the rogue, I don't know if you remember from BX, when the rogue caught his hand on the trap that he failed to see on the chest, like a poison needle trap. He goes, "Arg!" Arg!
That would be a thief, but yes, Carl makes the same mistake that
I know.
We've been watching Stranger Things. So what I like here, so this is one of the earlier editions of Phoenix Command. It's Spiral Bound, which I actually like Spiral Bound quite a bit.
Oh wow! So it came like that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they sold them that way, and because Spiral Bound lays flat, which is great. But the little quotes are in the edge here on the side margin, which I know Joe might not be able to see, but BJ, they're all the way over in the side margin, so they're out of the way. They're not messing anything up. But like this one, this is on medicine, on medical, and it has a quote from Dr. Oscar Snyderbunk: "Settle down, or I'll sew your earlobes to the bed." And there's stuff like that on almost every page. And almost every page has just one little quote, on just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Here's one on there's scratch, I can barely make it out. It's in Russian. It says, "This faces the N," and then it cuts off because it's obviously a claymore you came across. But yep. But anyway, that was a cool thing with Phoenix Command.
Yeah. Why don't more companies do spiral bound books, do we think? Is it more expensive? Is it?
I don't think it's necessarily more expensive. I think
they don't sit on the bookshelf as well, because with a regular book you can put it on a bookshelf and it's straight and you can read on the spine what the book is.
Makes sense.
But I agree, spiral bound for sitting at the table, because you're not breaking the spine, you're not tearing, you don't. I think they're better technical manuals for use at the table.
Right. And yeah, like I got into that like with war games, miniature war games, like Spiral Bound are great for that. But since we're on that, we'll take a minor sidestep here, and we'll talk about one of the things that John Allen Large has brought up in the past, and that's odd shaped books, or that's a pet peeve of mine too. Because the problem is fitting on your bookshelf, getting to fit. Whether they have books out now that are square, and you have other ones that are horizontal or vertical layout, horizontal layout, I guess. Instead of being long up and down, they're long, side to side, and they just don't fit with the rest of your stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder, like these little, like you mean like a little chat book, like I can't even see that little chat book, like this is a Chaosium.
The little ones aren't as bad to me as
they're not as bad.
Bigger ones and weird shaped things.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about. I could pull one off my shelf, but I won't. So Monte Games, your greatest game ever. It's like landscape.
Yeah, and it's
why it sticks out of my shelf.
Yeah.
It's a good. It has a great reference, but
yeah. Well, we had to give the nod to John because he's talked about landscape books in the past.
Oh, not liking them.
Yeah, not liking them.
Is this like the only thing that John and I might actually agree on?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't like a lot of white space and wasted space on the page either, like big margins and things.
Like D&D 5e.
Yeah. Well, and Phoenix Command actually has pretty wide margins on it in that book too.
But I think in the past, like if you compare, right, how they went to like larger font, bigger layout, lots of art in between, a lot of blank space, really, compared to like the old TSR era, DMG, right? It's very dense text. It's not quite 3 column. I feel like maybe like an old Ars Magica might have been 3 column, but that's crazy, right? That.
Well, some of the old games you can tell. Yeah.
Here's some TSR stuff. 3 column, 8-point font.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's like second edition, right? Or that second edition?
That's BX.
Oh, BX, right? 3 column. Yeah, but they packed a lot in like 32 pages, right? That was like standard format, 32 pages, and they packed a lot.
And to be fair, layout back then was a little bit different too.
AD&D same way.
Yeah. They went to that like at some point. This 3 column. It's kind of funny.
I don't know. The let's see. Did everybody get something they liked out? Ready to go?
We've been talking about back and forth, right?
Yeah, we've been talking back and forth. So, what about? And this maybe isn't a round robin as much. Well, why don't we go around and say what we don't like? But I kind of want to talk on if you have a preferred order of how things are in the book. To is there a better way to learn the rules? Like I like to see, obviously, table contents, and then if you want to have a page that if you have a game that has a core principle, if you have one of these games that has a core mechanic, give a succinct core mechanic up front. If you don't have core mechanic, skip that. Then I like to see character creation, and then combat, and then if you have spells, and then you can go off and do other stuff. But I don't know. Some games sync the character creation after all the other stuff, and if you don't know, I think creating your character and knowing how to do that and reading all those terms helps you understand the later, the combat and spell section and all that.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So we're unanimous on that. Good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Are we doing the order we like things, or are we doing things we don't like?
Well, let's go. We can come back to the order, I guess. The order isn't that big of a deal. I was just throwing that out there. Let's do things we don't like, and we'll let BJ's ready, so we're going to throw it to him.
I don't. I realize as games expand and you add supplements, you can't get away from this. But when you're getting to your core of the game, the one thing you need to play, I I guess I don't like it when that's spread out. And I know that like AD&D, first edition, you couldn't play without, you had to have the player's handbook and the dungeon master's guide. There were things that players needed to know that weren't in the player's handbook. So a player couldn't just bring their player's handbook with them and use that as a reference. And they just changed that starting in second edition, where everything you needed to know.
PJ froze. He's frozen.
No,
for me.
he's not just for you, Carl. You're frozen, Carl.
Everyone's frozen. Shit.
I think, BJ.
Yeah, I'm not frozen. I was waiting.
Yeah, you're not frozen. Yeah, it was Carl that was frozen.
That's me. I was frozen.
Yeah.
So if you and you can either do that by using too many volumes, or you can do it where, like I was talking about in Pathfinder, where the things that should be together in one concise paragraph, or you've got to reference 5 different pages to do something that comes up over and over and again every game session. I guess that would be my pet peeve is where things are not organized in a way that's concise, and I don't have to look at one page and read through it and go, that's how that rule works. That would be my.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Although I would say in the case of AD&D First Edition, the players are given what they need. They're not supposed to know those things in Dungeon Master's Guide.
Right, but that's
by design.
You couldn't take a player's handbook for AD&D and run a game with it.
Correct, you cannot.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, I say it's not really by design, because those books were released, your Holy Trinity, the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and DM's Guide were released, they were spread out, right? Yeah, like 77 and 78, like 79. So they were building as they went. And you saw that building as they went, where rules change. That's why the later books override the earlier books. Like the DMG overrides Monster Manual, right?
Okay.
But
Unearthed Arcana overrides.
What's that?
Unearthed Arcana overrides.
That doesn't count. That's the book that shall not be named. But Gygax is very clear that players are not supposed to look at the DMG. In fact, I'll find the.
But aren't there attack matrix and saving throw progressions in the DMG though?
Yeah, but the players don't need that. That's not necessary for the players. Here it is. This is in the forward of the DMG. As this book is the exclusive precedent of the DM, you must view any non-DM player possessing it as something less than worthy of honorable death. Peeping players there will undoubtedly be, but they are simply lessening their own enjoyment of the game by taking away some of the sense of wonder that otherwise arises from a game which has rules hidden from participants. It is in your interest and theirs to discourage possession of this book by the players. If any of your participants do read herein, it is suggested that you assess them a heavy fee for consulting sages and other sources of information not normally attainable by inhabitants of your milieu. If they express knowledge which could only be garnered by consulting these pages, a magic item or two can be taken as payment. Insufficient, but perhaps it will tend to discourage such actions. So I guess maybe there's
Mark Miller is laughing because, in contrast, Traveler, it's got everything you need right there up front. Right. This is how the dice roll. This is how you make a character.
I guess but I don't disagree with BJ. AD&D the way it is, it's horrible to try to find a rule because it's spread across 3. Actually, it's more than 3 books because some of the weights and capacities for like carrying capacities for like bags and backpacks and things are actually in like the character record supplement and the NPC record supplement. So you actually need some of those to get the complete picture too. So AD&D is horribly laid out. There's no question about it.
Or if you subscribe to that early dragons that have all that stuff too,
Yeah. But what do you guys think about, and then we'll throw at somebody else for bad things, but what do you think about High Gygaxian? Some of these books written like that, like I mean, that taught me vocabulary as a kid, reading the DMG and reading those books. But that said, I know a lot of people are turned off by that kind of language and that kind of wordy.
It sounds a little pretentious. It sounds a little pretentious sometimes, but I think Gygax was trying. It was a little tongue in cheek. He's trying to be kind of funny when he's doing it a lot of times. But I think between D&D and comic books, my vocabulary just comic books have pretty advanced vocabulary. People who don't read comics don't realize that. But and just trying to explore some of the concepts between D&D, going, what kind of armor was that? Where was that invented? And then go and looking that up, and or they'll make some reference to some sort of space-time theory.
Right. And back then
I'm going looking it up. What's that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly. And back then you weren't looking up on the internet. We were going to the library to look it up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
World Book Encyclopedia.
Who's next? Carl, you have something?
I want to hear what Joe says first.
Okay.
I don't read all that many rule books. So, all of my don'ts have to do with accessibility stuff, not really layout, which accessibility is part of layout. They go together. You can't really have one without the other, but that's really what it comes down to. Like, I don't want a bunch of random tables and charts in my game when I'm reading a book, because screen readers don't do those well at all. They read one side of the column, then the top part of the column, then they'll go down. It's a mess trying to go through charts and stuff with a screen reader. So, like, when I say the stuff I don't like, I realize not having random tables and shit is anathema to a bunch of people, but for me, it's a practical issue,
If they would put the tables in an appendix or on one page, and it just says, "See this table,"
right? Yeah, when you have it in the middle of like a paragraph or something, it blows up the whole screen reader. It's reading, then all of a sudden it'll be like column A says, and it's like So
maybe what they need to do is, or what would be ideal, I should say, is if you had two different versions of the document, right? The PDF, one with all the tables in the back, and then one with the regular layout. Just because the opposite side of that, although it totally doesn't work for you, is a lot of people, when they're reading about the table, want to see that table on the same page.
Yeah.
That it's saying, can see table A to see how many hit points each character class has. You don't want to turn to the back. Now, in your case, it makes sense, right?
Right.
So, or don't put that stuff in a table. Just put it listed in the paragraph, right? But
yeah, I'm a big fan of like the plain text documents for games. Speaking of that, I saw that that one crazy game, Morkborg, that just released like a plain text version, I heard.
But it's not really plain text. It still has crazy fonts and in the plain text, and the the font size changes throughout the document. It's still, it's not just, it's still pretty unusable. Okay. That's not true. It's usable, but it's still pretty.
Yeah, I just heard.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Carl's a big fan of Morkborg, though.
I don't know if I'm a big fan of Morkborg, but I'll support it because I got some buddies that live in San Antonio that have done successful Kickstarters for it.
Nice.
But and I played it and I've had a good time, so that's the important thing, right? So, but I don't know. I guess we were messing around on the Discord, but Jason not being a big fan of this gothic, script type font, but they're definitely worse. Right, every single death metal band, that sort of, what is it? All that
Heckler Delta.
No, it's like all that thorn stuff.
Yeah, like Mandy or like any. Yeah, and definitely. But like I said, you can do. Yeah, you can do those things, but you can still read it if they want to do it. I'm wearing a Runehammer shirt here that has all the crazy things, but it has Runehammer legible in the middle of it. Right. So
see, that's just not metal though, right? It has to look like deteriorating leather seats, all scratchy. No, I don't know. Yeah, readability I think is a big thing, and I would say I haven't looked through that document, but definitely like Morkborg is a fun read, but it's like you really gotta. I do admit that you do have to like search and pull out. They have things that I know. I don't know if you've checked it out, Joe, but they have tables everywhere, right? So it would not be fun, and it's not fun for me to like break my text with these tables. I want to just read straight. And I guess going back to your point about high Gygaxian, I think since I was reading Howard and Lovecraft at the time, it really didn't, the vocabulary didn't bother me. I thought it was cool, all that Appendix N stuff that I was reading concurrently, and starting D&D. There was no problem. I do hope that when he says like player can't look at the DMG, he's tongue in cheek, but.
Well, I mean, it's a play style, and actually back then there was something to that kind of thing. I mean, if you listen to the Grognard Files, one of the great podcasts, out there, that they talk about how they had the rule that if once somebody bought a game, nobody else could buy that game because nobody could have the rules except for the GM for that game.
We had that rule as kids too, and then we grew up and realized that's kind of silly.
Right. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of odd that it would go from especially stemming from a war game perspective, because you need everyone to know what the rules are, because if not, then
not that
look at the fights, right?
In a war game, you get to look at your opponent's army list and know his capabilities.
Yeah,
which
is kind of weird coming out of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think from modern game and modern sensibility, there's no. It's more interesting to be open, and then you always have someone. I think for me, it's not a bad thing to have like someone who also knows the rules that's playing, just to help you look up a rule or check your work, or not question you about something, but just to kind of help you out.
I think when I'm trying to think of how Gygax was when he broke the DMG, but when you write that and present that to a bunch of people in their late 20s on, they get the message. When you write that and you present it to a bunch of 15-year-old kids, that gives one kid permission to go on a power trip.
Actually, that
and
I don't know if you heard it.
Most horrible DM stories really come down to this was a 14-year-old kid DMing for a bunch of 12 and 13-year-old kids. It's rarely is it, well, if you look around far enough, you can find horror stories of people in the 40s and 50s, sure. But I think most of our experiences, when we think of that archetypical power mad DM, it was a high school kid who was just the oldest person, or he was the guy who got the DMG.
It's funny.
As shown in Stranger Things.
Yeah, well, but it's funny BJ says that, because that was just discussed on and I'm going to plug another podcast here. That was just discussed on an episode of What Would the Smart Party Do? I don't know if any of you guys listened to that, but they just did an episode on Wednesday where they talked about D&D in the 70s. That's the title. It's their latest episode we're recording, but just look for D&D in the 70s Smart Party Show. It's actually a great episode. They've got who's on here? They've got Jonathan Tweets on there. Hollis Monroe, who's been DMing from the very early days. You'd like him, Joe. You'd like his style. But anyway, they talk about that. And one of the things they talk about, and it's near the end of the episode, but they say, when they all started, it was all older kids, high school kids, college kids, whatever, that were playing the games, right? It wasn't little kids playing the games, or, it wasn't junior high and whatever playing the games. So and that's where you get into problem with alignment and things like that. And when you get the younger people that don't have, aren't as mature playing, but in their experience initially, they never had a lot of problems with that because everybody was older that was playing. But it's a really good episode where they talk about.
I'm just curious, because contrast that to like 1979, 80, right? When a lot of us got our first.
Well, yeah, we were a lot younger.
Not Joe, because Joe was, I don't know. Joe is reincarnating at the time from past life, but that's when I got. So, and then at that point, you're in junior high or late elementary school, and that's when you get it. So it's kind of interesting that a few years later, all of a sudden it becomes, you have D&D clubs in junior high, which I had. So
yeah, well, it was before that. I was 10. I was in like 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah,
when I got into it. So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so I know we've mentioned something I think we may fail to mention, actually. So all of us, I don't know, Jason, I don't know if you've looked through Pathfinder 2, but BJ, Joe, and I have commented that Pathfinder 2 has a bad layout without giving examples. So we should probably give some examples of that, just real quick. And I'll start. And I think what I don't like as a bad layout is like the class feats are in the class section, and the other feats are in the other section, and the skill feats are in the skill section.
It makes no fucking sense.
I know.
So dumb.
Just have a chapter on feats where they're alphabetized.
And they do. They do have a chapter on feats. That's what's stupid. They have a chapter on feats, but the skill feats and the class feats are not there.
Oh, it's infuriating.
That was a problem with earlier editions of Barbarians of Lemuria. Actually, they had the feats under the not races, but under the whatever like nationality you were, whatever region you're from. They had feats under those. It's it's better in Mythic in the newest edition, but in the earlier editions, yeah, they were spread out a little bit. But yeah, I don't own the Pathfinder 2 book. I just use the online, the SRD, because I'm cheap.
And it may be my fault for not thoroughly reading the first chapter, but if you just look at kind of a little index, I do like this, that every page, every even odd number page on the right has the index right there, so you know what chapter you're in and what but if you were to just glance at that, you would really never take away that the whole core of building a character in Pathfinder is feats. Right. There's some other stuff that's in there, but it really is all driven by the feats that you use to build your character based on your ancestry, your background, your class, and then other stuff and skills. But yeah, if they had just had one chapter on feats, and then in the chapters on classes and skills, say you could have a list of the feats available for a class, and then just say hey, you'll find them in the chapter on feats. That would be a lot easier than they're just spread out everywhere.
Yeah. So I guess Joe spoke his mind emphatically already about feats.
Yeah, I what you guys said it better than I would. I agree with you guys.
Yeah, I think on top of that too, I think the magic section is not in alphabetical order.
It's not an alphabetical. Why is it not in alphabetical order? Makes it so goddamn hard to find anything.
Right. It's in order of power order.
Yeah. But how are D&D spell lists? They're not in alphabetical order. They are within spell level, but they're in level order, right?
Right. Class level, and then the spells per level in order. But they're in alphabetical order in the chapter on spells. But then you've got a spell list at the beginning of that chapter that says, "Here's the cleric spell list by level. Here's the druid.
Right.
Here's the
like." If you wanted to go look up how Magic Missile worked in older versions, you would just flip to the spell section, look at M, and find Magic Missile. In Pathfinder 2, you got to figure out what different spell schools, what type of magic actually get Magic Missile, then go to that section and then flip through it. It's just,
That actually how
level and the level first and then alphabetical. Right? So it's not.
But that's how older D&D is. That's how first edition is. And BX is.
Well, BX though. BX is like 5 spells per.
You can put it all on one page.
Level. It's on a handful of pages. It's not like the majority. And then you go to AD&D and it's like the majority of the players' handbook, right? So it's a big jump there. So I would say that in BX it's okay. That works because there's not very many. Even but in the AD&D it is annoying sometimes to try to figure that out. Of course, I believe like 3.5. 3.5. Then it was all alphabetical order, right? And they just said I think so. Maybe it was also level and alphabetical. Anyway,
I think it was just all.
I agree. So that's why we go to Archives of Nethys or the SRD because
right,
easier to find things.
Well, DCC is the same. I always have to have a problem finding spells in DCC.
Well, DCC is maddening. As much as I love DCC, the book is so thick, because
if any game needed the spells in a separate book, it was and it's not a bad thing. The spells is so big because each spell is like 2 pages because it covers like all the weird stuff that can happen with the spell, which is great. I love the spells and I love DCC's magic, but it could be a separate book,
right? Well, but I do appreciate DCC because they know that I don't know, maybe their audience they feel is older and they have nice big font. A Lots of
It's
space.
true. The biggest thing, folks, though,
comes with a coupon for reading glasses.
Right.
if you don't use it now, if you're interested in Dungeon Crawl Classics, DCC, and you don't use it, go to the Purple Sorcerer website, Purple Sorcerer. I'll put a link in the show notes, and they have a crawler app. It's free. It works on all your phones. That you can do it on your laptop, but it has everything you need as the spells, as the crit tables, the fumble tables. You can as a dice roller. It has the rules for charging and grappling and all this stuff's in this app, so you can easily find it. And I can't tell, every time we play DCC or flavor DCC, I'm using the crawler app the whole game.
Yeah. So maybe we should talk about switch gears a little bit in this last bit and switch to games that we really like the layout, or a game that, or did you want to jump?
Well, let's do starter sets.
Oh, starter sets. Okay.
That way we're not necessarily, because we kind of beat up on Pathfinder 2 a little bit, but that's just.
Well, we said it was bad and we needed examples.
Yeah, but maybe I'm not against pointing out good games either. But I did want to talk about starter sets for a minute, in the idea of, in your opinion, what's a good starter set? What kind of things should be in the starter set? And we can definitely talk about good starter sets here. Who did a good job with this. And I'll lead off here. I'll say one thing I don't like in a starter set. I understand why they do it. I don't like having a really condensed version of the rules in there. I don't like having to buy the starter set and then also having to buy the rule book. Right. And I know it's kind of, well, you go to the BX, yeah, you have two separate sets, basic and expert, but the basic is still complete up through third level. And the same thing with whether it's, depending what version you're playing, maybe fifth level and some of the newer ones, I don't know. But it's a complete game, right? Where some starter sets, you don't get enough, like the Alien starter set. I think, Carl, you own the Alien starter set from Free League, right?
Yeah, I haven't.
But you have to buy the core book separate from that, right? Can you do anything with the Alien starter set except play the starter adventure?
I don't know. I haven't studied that.
Okay.
So, but
more
than likely,
spot, but
yeah, more than likely. I mean, I think in contrast, though, like a good starter set, and I think maybe Chaosium in general does good starter sets, but the Chaos. So because that is true, I agree. I don't mind that you have you have the rules. But what I don't like is that the starter set rules are incompatible with the rules at large, right? With like the core book rules, and that.
So
Cyberpunk
Red is guilty of that.
Yeah, and so it's like Starfinder. Yeah, Starfinder, you cannot play like we started with the starter set. I had the rule book and I said have starter set. And I'm like, Pathfinder. Paizo. They're good about keeping things consistent. But we played the Starfinder starter set, and then there's things that are extremely different. In the main rule book. So, which is unfortunate. But in contrast, though, you can more or less play Call of Cthulhu 7th edition with the little pamphlet rules in the starter set. You might have to look up like Eldritch Tomes or something in the bigger book, but you can that's what I don't take my big tomes to convention. I take the starter set, and I can run out of the little pamphlet investigator rulebook because it's got more or less most of the things you need. So. I think that's my opinion. So, but so in contrast, so you said you had a good starter set then, or no?
Oh well, yeah. I'll tell you what starter set, and this is from maybe a decade ago, but this is before Pathfinder 2. But Pathfinder came out with a starter set in the mid 2000s. That was it had pogs in there, and it had dice in there, and it had like a map in there, and an adventure, and it was a pretty good starter set. We got it for my son, and it was arguably like the second coming of the old Menser Red Box, which the Menser Red Box was the standard back in the day, because you had the choose your own adventure kind of path where you'd go through like Fighting Fantasy Joe kind of adventure in there to learn how to play the game and stuff like that. But I think having an adventure with a map and and dice and the pogs especially, so you could, represent people on the map and all that. I think that was really nice to have in there. Not necessary, but especially for Pathfinder, which is pretty tactical. It's nice to have that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, so I think
all that stuff, but
I think my favorite starter set right now, and I haven't gotten to use it, is the new RuneQuest starter set. I like so it is kind of a basic RuneQuest. It's an iteration of RuneQuest, but like at a basic level. It has pre-generated characters for you, Jason. It has the rules, the world. It has a solo quest, much like what they did in the Call of Cthulhu starter set. So you as the GM or who's going to run it knows what's going on. And then it has 3 adventures, ready-made, like I said, ready-made adventurers, etc. And then a bunch of maps. And here's like the thickness of all the stuff that's in it, right? It's pretty nice. And the maps are very nice. But what I think is kind of cool, they have this handout that says what's in the box, but it says what's not in the box. So then it says, okay, this is a basic rule set. If you want to advance, get to an advanced play in RuneQuest, then you can get to advanced character generation, equipment beyond what they have, advanced combat options, etc. All the stuff that you would need. So they have everything you need to play these adventures and in this box, but then direct you to the main stuff. It also has a set of this.
Does it have rules? You say advanced character creation. Does it have rules for basic character creation, or are you stuck with the pre-gens?
I believe you are stuck with the pre-gens. Maybe that it could be a failing for it, but the pre-gens are pretty damn good. It's their iconic. They're cool iconic characters that they have in all the art. So it's not a bad thing. You get to play the buffalo riding warrior woman. So yeah, that's all you need to know to play that. I really like it. It's a really great production value. The RuneQuest starter set.
So she's a buffalo woman she's a woman buffalo riding a buffalo woman?
No, it's a woman who's a warrior who rides a buffalo into battle.
I figured BJ would have got that. He's seen that movie that I'm referring to. But anyway. All
right, that's my starter set.
And I don't want to ruin the movie for anybody, so I won't elaborate on that little joke. But any thoughts on starter sets, BJ, Joe?
BJ, what you got?
I really like the 5e starter set. The pre-gens, you got a set of dice. It lacks the character creation, really, and it doesn't have the full. I mean, you don't have all the classes and races you get in a full player's handbook, but it's got the stuff you need to run through the adventure that's in there, and it's got a really good starter adventure. And then if you pair that with the free rules that you can pull off the PDF, you could expand and create your own adventures and some different types of characters, but again, not the full set of availability to follow up or to start over with new first level characters after you kind of get a feel for it. So I think between the box set and the free PDFs that you can get on the website, it's a really good starter package for that, and it's got a good layout and good artwork and pretty sturdy construction. So it's a pretty good introduction to how to play the game. And I'll be interested to see. We're in, what are we in, 8 years now of 5th edition. So there's a new starter set coming out next month.
Oh, really?
And the characters that are in the artwork are based on the characters from the D&D cartoon show from the 80s.
So, really?
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. They're coming up to their 50th. They're going to start hitting nostalgia hard.
Yeah.
That's why they're hitting Spelljammer. And
the cleric isn't because there was no cleric in that show, but
right.
The fighter, the thief, and the
paladin.
It's Hank and Diana and Eric.
Yeah.
Maybe the unicorn. Maybe the little unicorn is the cleric. They touch you with his horn, heal you.
Go
ahead, BJ.
I've got the RuneQuest and the Call of Cthulhu, but I haven't played through them yet, so I need to crack those open and check them out.
Yeah. So this is the D&D starter set, not the essentials, right?
The Essentials is also a good starter, but it's very different. The Lost Mines of Phandelver will run you on more of a. It's not complete railroad, but it is a very linear. Here's your objective, and then you go from you're kind of guided from one milestone to the next. The Essentials kit is much more of a sandbox. There's a job board in the town, and the DM is instructed to just, as they level up, to put more complicated jobs on there. So it's a little curated, but it's also, here are 3 things, pick one, what sounds interesting to you. And after they've completed a couple of them, you put a couple more on the job board that are for a little more higher level characters. But they wind up exploring the area quite a bit before they kind of get to the big boss battle at the end.
Yeah, I've got both those. I haven't opened either one. I'm probably going to give them away at some point. I do have an alibi, though. Alibi fire real quick. BJ talked about you can go and use the free rules online, which is great. All for that. And we've been talking about Pathfinder, how you go the SRD online, which is great. But one thing I don't like in rule books is when they refer you online to explain something. Go to our website to see this, because 20 years from now, when I have the rule book and the company's closed 15 years, has been shut down 15 years, that's gone now. And I can't go reference it. Or they'll say, go watch this video. There'll be a link to or not a link, but URL for a YouTube video to see this example play. Go to our YouTube channel and watch that. I hate that.
Go players.
Is one thing, but if it's necessary for the game, it should be in the game. It shouldn't refer you to the internet for a necessary part of the game.
Yeah, go players. Go look at the starter adventure and get all the spoilers.
Yeah.
Well, but it's not even because of that. It's just the fact that.
Yeah, I haven't come across that. I don't like that. I don't.
Yeah, this sounds awful.
Some of the smaller publishers will do that.
Yeah.
Indie games will do
it's
that.
a space saving measure, right? Like,
right.
Cuts down on words, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what's your starter set of choice?
I'm gonna go way back. I'm gonna go with the TSR product. Surprisingly enough, I'm gonna go with Marvel Superheroes. I remember getting that box set as a kid, because I'm sort of putting box sets and starter sets.
Yeah,
together.
Because I agree.
And I just remember getting that box set as a kid and just thinking it was the coolest, and it had everything. Like, that's all I thought the game was. I didn't realize till later on that there was actually other TSR Marvel books out there, I think. But like with that box set, we played the crap out of Marvel so we played it like a bunch. It was one of our go-to games, and it was just, I loved it. I loved everything about it.
Yeah, and it had everything. And you had the map of New York in there. It had they'd later come out with a bigger one, but yeah, it was a great starter set. You're right. It had the map. I don't remember if it had figures in there. I think it had figures in there. I think it had figures with standees and stuff, and
the
dice and
for sure. Yeah,
it had all the rules to create characters, and had everything. It had cards for a bunch of the superheroes. Your standard superheroes were in there, and yeah, you're right. It was that yellow box is all you needed.
That yellow box.
Yellow box. Yeah. Yeah, you never needed the advanced set. That yellow box is all you need to play that game. Period.
And that's cool. I think these starter sets are coming out of that, or that, I don't know if it's tradition, but all these box sets, from basic to expert, right? I'm looking around in my collection. I have Star Frontiers box set, Star Frontiers Out Nighthawks box set, Mega Traveler box set, right? It's pretty cool,
Yeah.
And I think that's what it comes. Oh, there's my basic box.
I can tell you a pet peeve about one box, two pet peeves about one starter set. And that's the Traveler Mongoose second edition box set. It's a good box set in general, but the lid does not go flush down over the top.
Ooh.
So it doesn't set evenly on a shelf. It's got so you can't set it upright unless you get it between two books. That's my one pet peeve about the box itself. Everything else is high quality, and that the starting adventure is the definition of railroad. Not in a. This is kind of a new adventure. Just go with it. It's kind of a Traveler is a game about getting a ship and exploring the stars. The first thing they do is maroon you on a planet and tells the GM not to give them a ship until they finish the entire adventure.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, but so, and that's a discussion for a later show.
Right.
We're coming up to time here. We need to wrap up, but yeah, I think that because I think there is a place for railroads, especially for, this is your first RPG. You've never done one of these things before. There's something, because just giving people sandboxing, but I don't know that, but that's a discussion for a future show. I think. But any final, we're coming up against a time hack for some of the panel members. So any final thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, I got some final thoughts. I mean, it'd been awesome if we could list out, but we got into various tangents, which is fun. I love the freeform nature of this, but I would say a game to check out that I think has a fantastic layout. And I wish I could have dug it out of my shelf, and I'd like to get it to the table. But it's a game called Aquelarre, and it has what I love about it. It has mechanics. It's the first part of the book, and it has character creation and the rules, and then it goes into the world and how it works. Magic, the world, how it works, the cosmology. So it's really well laid out. So check that game out. And then there's a box set I haven't. It's called it's by a third party. Well, everything's third party 5e now, isn't it? But it's a box set that I haven't checked out that I would like to check out, especially since some of you mentioned in the Marvel it had pogs and stuff like that. And this is Legends of Omeria, the box set by DM Dave, who has a Patreon. But it looks really cool. It's pretty big, right? Not your standard size, might upset some people, but it's cool. It does have it has those little pogs, which is nice, and it has the standalone rules for 5e and things that change, that might change in the world specific for DM Dave's world, and then the adventures. So I think it's pretty cool. And then pre-gens, etc. So I'm looking forward to checking out that box set. I think I like these starter box sets. They're pretty fun. They can really get a game to the table. Which actually also, last thing, sorry, reminds me that's one of the first. That's the first week of RPG a day is getting new people into the game, how you're going to do it, etc. Right? It's each week has a theme, and I think that's one of the first themes. And I think starter sets are a great way to do that.
Well, definitely, and so follow up show definitely needs to be introducing new people to the hobby, but there's no question starter sets. I mean, because I know for me, my introduction to the hobby really was being given a starter set for Christmas or my birthday, or I forget which, right? So, but as far as if we're picking something, I really like the Cyberpunk 2020 set. Now it's got or rulebook. I think it does. Well, not I think it does have some fanfic in there. It does have some stories in there, which I know Carl doesn't like. But Cyberpunk 2020 is set up. It's got the character creation, which isn't too long, and it goes into combat and it goes into other stuff. I just like the way it's laid out. It's easy to find things in for the most part. So Cyberpunk 2020 would be a good thing, but you can have too much of a good thing if you have too much in your character creation. Cyberpunk Red, on the other hand, I don't like the layout of that one because they've expanded a lot of those background tables when you generate your character to be career specific. So the character creation section ends up being huge, and it gets unwieldy after a certain point. So you have to be careful of that. But Cyberpunk 2020 would be my vote for a well laid out rulebook. Joe.
I'm going to go with one of the few physical rule books I own as far as one that I like for the layout, and that's this little guy, Romance of the Perilous Lands.
Dismissing rules.
Yeah, I think does a really good job of it's laid out really nicely. It goes with a little brief intro, then into character creation, then equipment, then playing the game, then spell casting, then some world lore, then the bestiary, then a really nice index. I just think this is a really well put together little book.
If I remember, I haven't looked at it since we played. Joe ran that for myself and Colin and Dave.
Yeah, the system might have some hiccups, but as far as layout goes, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, if I remember. And the nice, and so that's something we didn't talk about was art. And one thing Romance of the Perilous Lands does is it's got a good representation of different people in the art, which I think is important, especially nowadays, because people want to see characters in the books that they can relate to. I mean, it depends on the world. If you're Taos Lanta, you're not going to relate to anybody, right? But in most of these things, you want to be able to relate to somebody. And if you don't see anybody that looks like you in the book, you know, that can be a turnoff. Where Romance of the Perilous Land, you know, goes straight into that, which is nice. It has, you know, people are representative of all kinds of people in there, which I actually like. BJ.
I like, well, I've already mentioned, I like old school essentials, even though I realize that's more of a reference manual, assuming you already know how to play the game, because it's just a reference manual. And then I've also mentioned I like the way Wizards of the Coast does their stuff. But as far as something I haven't mentioned, Index Card RPG. Well laid out. Again, he straight to the point, a lot of bulleted lists, very straight to the, you know, there's not excessive use of white space, but it's not just walls of text that make your eyes tired or get lost. Good use of artwork, and I know it's Hankering's own artwork. He's a really good artist. You know, I don't know as far as accessibility how well this would work for Joe, but I don't know if the PDF is laid out the same way as the actual print for this. But I think it's just but yeah. But overall, I think in terms of readability and layout, it's a really good book.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it does something to me that I like I mentioned Akalata, because it has introduction, core system, players, GMs, then the worlds, right? It's very nicely set up that way.
Yeah, it's well organized too. Not in terms of just the page layout, but it's well organized and easy to read.
Yeah, it's not too wordy. I like that. So
yeah, well, the only thing, and I like ICRPG a lot. I like all Runehammer's products a whole lot. The one thing they are, though, is they're DIY games and their toolkits. Now, Master Edition is much more a book. You can sit down, somebody new can sit down and read and run the game, but it still kind of has that little bit, make it your own. It expects you to house rule. It expects you to make command decisions as you're doing stuff. Yeah. It's not that it leaves holes in there. It's just it, you know, and it kind of prompts you, hey, you know, make the world your own, right? Which is a good thing.
I think
it may not be a great first RPG. But if you've never played an RPG, it might not be but it might be. It depends on the person. I think it's best if you learn from somebody else, not just pick a book up on your own.
Yeah. I think for me though, you know, all of this, and kind of if I was having like a summary of kind of what we've been talking about, is to keep in mind that role-playing games books are reference manuals. They need to be entertaining and engaging and look good enough that it's a joy to hold them and read them. And that's where those little excerpts of examples of play or a phrase from a fictional story that exemplifies the genre, those are good. But at the end of the day, if I'm playing a game, whether as a player, but particularly as a GM, and I have to stop the game for 10 minutes to sort through a book to try to figure out whether you hit a monster or not, you may have the best designed rule set out there, but if it's not usable in the way it's presented in the manual, I'm likely to not want to play that game again. And I'm going to say, hey, let's just play something that I can run smoothly, you know. And everybody gives there's a little bit of leeway when everybody's learning a new game. But once people get the core rules down, we shouldn't be having to. It's not that we shouldn't be looking things up. It should be looking things up. Should just take a minute or two. Not okay. Everybody go to the bathroom, get a beer, because it's going to take me a while to sort this out. You know.
Yeah. I mean, if you have that problem, just switch to ICRPG, because you can do any game with that system. So we'll be better off. Thank you, everybody, for joining the panel tonight. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
A Nerd Central broadcast, Cerebral podcast. Let's savor all the flavors from the sign of Hemstrong. The All-Stars and Pods past, Cerebral podcast. You're counting down your last as you admire them all. The sun is blowing. just hoping you bring them, baby. All I need is the six shades of freak. And from what I understand, that's what you do. Don't look now, this Rulebook is coming, and all that's left is the crying and the running. You can bring it, you can hide, I'll be above in any order. Just another ring of Rulebooks, off the running for the border. Just a snack like a one, can I stutter? Here and here. It's bread and butter, you can eat on a bacon, and his customers never say it. It's savory, the flavor of the memories it created.